What is up, everyone? It is Cody here with a Bystial Azamina Fiendsmith Red Eyes deck profile, I guess. I put this together over the last, probably month. As soon as I realized how crazy of a card Deception actually is, I really wanted to find a fun shell to put it in. I've been playing Bell up to the point of building this deck, and the Azamina cards do work in Bell as well, but I wanted something kind of fresher and newer, and didn't really see anybody playing with these cards specifically. And being a longtime fan of Dragon Link, these cards are very near and dear to my heart, so I wanted to make them work, and through the testing I've done so far of this deck, they actually do. So I'll get into it right now. We'll start with the core of the deck, which is the Azamina / Sinful Spoils engine. And that's 3 Deception, which I do want to cut to 2 and play 3 Diabellstar instead. I just don't have a 3rd Diabellstar at the moment, but the basic idea of it is Deception will tribute a monster from hand or field to search Hallowed Azamina, and this unlocks a line which inevitably gets you to Ilia Sylvia, which is your Omni Negate, as well as a Desiree. And technically you also have the extra body from Sequence. So this one card, Deception or Wanted or Diabellstar, all get you to this, which is just an insane amount of value for one card to be providing. And even though it does tribute a monster, and Diabellstar has to eventually send a monster, there are plenty of permutations of the line where you actually plus off of the combo instead of just going net neutral as far as cards in hand go. So the way that all happens is the Deception combo eventually puts you in a case of having Murcielago and Diabellstar on field, which you can then fold into Moon of the Closed Heaven to access your Fiendsmith line. So that, of course, means we are playing the Fiendsmith cards, and I went with 3 Engraver. 2 is an option moving forward to either make room for more non-engine or just to cut down the deck count, because we're at 45 at the moment. It's just a place I like my decks to be personally. Then we've got 1 Lacrima, 1 Lurry, 1 Tract. Lacrima's a really great card. It gives you access to Chaos Angel through the Fiendsmith line, or just turns errant bodies into a Chaos Angel, which is very handy. This is a competent normal summon as well in a deck that doesn't really need its normal summon very heavily. The only thing you use it on are the Red Eyes cards, and that's not strictly needed, especially going second. You don't really need those cards because of what they provide. So, yeah. There's a lot of synergy with having an Engraver in hand, as well as with the Sinful Spoils engine. Because of Necroquip Princess, you're able to pitch this Engraver and then draw a card, which is where you start to go net neutral in the combo instead of minusing on the initial combo as far as your hand size goes. And to further aid in the Advantage engine, we've got the Bystial engine. We've got our 1 Magnamud, of course, the best one. 3 Lubellion, 3 Serenir, then 3 of the offensive hand traps, the 2 Druis, 1 Baldrake. Baldrake is mostly just for going first, and then having this in your rotation to be able to trigger other things, like trigger your Druis Worm, trigger your Desiree Send, things like that. And banishing an extra deck summon is very powerful in and of itself anyway, but it just needs to be comboed with another Bystial for it to do enough going first, whereas Druis Worm kind of puts on pressure on its own. Opening Serenir with the Deception combo is also really powerful because it puts a Lubellion in graveyard, and because we're on Ptolemy M7 in the extra deck as well, you're able to cycle back that Lubellion and turn this Serenir into a Magnamud, plus a Lubellion on field, which is kind of crazy. So that is the main point of the Bystials, is to also establish Regained and have that constant +1 card advantage every single turn cycle, because you're summoning back Magnama, adding a Bystial, drawing a card off a Bystial that you added every single turn, and it ends up being too much for anybody to really deal with, because together with the Bystials cycling themselves like that, you have the Azamina cards constantly cycling the Omni Negate back on the field, and you have the Fiendsmith cards constantly cycling back onto the field. So you end up playing a lot of really grindy games where it feels like you're maybe on the back foot the entire time, but because of how much just sheer advantage you get from this deck, you're never really in a bad position. So you get to play a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! While also just being comfortable, which is kind of a rare thing these days. the metagame has really shifted to this feeling of like, if you go first, you win. If you go second, you lose. But this deck kind of is able to play all of these Bystials, which I think are the best hand traps in the format right now, together with like 15 other, or I think it's 13 other non-engine. So you're at like 19, 20 non-engine in a 45 card list. It's a lot of hand traps. You open like 3 hand traps maybe half the time, and then the other half the time you're seeing 1 or 2 still, and then a bunch of engine. So post side, especially with these 6 cards coming out, this is like your go first normal summon, and going second you replace these with more hand traps, more board breakers, depending on what the situation calls for. But black metal on its own does give you a lot of interaction for very little investment. Like 6 cards in the main deck, 2 of which actually turn any Bystial into an Omni Negate as well, is very powerful. But you'll go normal black metal, link it into Striker Dragon. Black metal will search your red MD, which will banish the striker to summon back the black metal, which you can then link off and use the non-once per turn add of the black metal dragon, getting you seals as well as full metal dragon. So even without a Bystial in hand, so long as seals summons a Bystial from deck, you can then max metamorph that Bystial into the full metal dragon, which gives you an Omni Negate that's 3800 attack, burns for an attack position monster's attack on your opponent's field, and it can't be targeted or destroyed by monster or spell effects. So it is like essentially a Tower's Omni Negate that's super, super hard to get rid of and super easy to go into. And importantly as well, you do 2 extra deck summons or 2 hand summons. So you're only ever giving them a +1 off of either Mulch Army, and you're ending on, you know, like 3, maybe 4 interruptions if you go, or sorry, 2, maybe 3 interruptions if you end on Druid Worm off of the seal as well. And that's all pretty good as far as a way to play into the Mulch Armies. So I do like it for that aspect as well, and that's why I went for this rather than something else like Ubel, which loses a lot harder to the Charmies innately. This gives you like a very high floor for the deck to compete with. Then the last cards of the list, of course, are what I think are the best and most generic hand traps. You could very well play Charmies in this list. Like, I don't think Charmies are a bad thing to main deck at all. I just don't see the real need with how competent a lot of these cards are and how many hand traps you're already playing. Drawing more doesn't necessarily give you more interaction. It just gives you like more ways to combo, which is meritable in its own rights. It's just a matter as well of like the Charmies I have available to me at the moment aren't really the ones I want to main deck. So I went with just what I thought were the most applicable hand traps in general, like especially with my locals having a good amount of Tenpai, not as much as there used to be, but a good amount of Tenpai, and a lot of voiceless voice. The Charmies aren't really as good into those lists, whereas these cards just are always going to be live every single game. So I'd rather run it that way. But that runs us through the whole main deck, 45 cards, as I said. You could either cut the Deception entirely and cut the Engraver, the third Engraver, and then cut the second Druid Worm, and either bring that down to 42, or like play Charmies in the list instead, and then you have, you know, 15 hand traps, your 6 Bystials, giving you 21 non-engine plus the called by. That's totally good too. Or you could just play more of the engine cards. It is still a work in progress for sure. Like, I'm basically building this deck from scratch. Nobody else is doing something like this that I can find. So we will go to the extra deck next, and a lot of these cards we've already seen. The Murcielago, which searches you a Sinful Spoils or Azamina card, which then gives you fuel for your Sacred Azamina to make Ilia Sylvia, which is just an Omni Negate that tributes itself. Which again is another point in favor of playing the Mulch Armies, is if you get Mulch Armied and have to just do a very minimal play line, if you have a Charmy in hand, you can make your Sylvia, tribute off the Sylvia, and then drop a Charmy. Because you don't control any cards anymore. So that's something really relevant as well, and something I think people are overlooking with this engine. Because it feels like it plays poorly into Mulch Armies because of how much extra deck stuff you can do, but the floor of this deck is very high still. So that is good. And then we have our 2 Fiendsmith fusions, of course. Necroquip, as mentioned before, lets you draw cards with Engraver, with Lubellion. If you can go into this before doing a Deception line, and you want to try that, you can. It is really, the world is your oyster with this card. It gives you such crazy advantage, and you can even just like have it sit on your end board so that you're drawing cards as you're hand trapping your opponent, and it just feels so terrible to stare down against because you're just getting cards for free and you're stopping their plays at the same time. I don't know. This card is bonkers. Like, this card is so good for no reason. And as mentioned before, you can make Chaos Angel. You can make High Caesar if you really want to. Like, there are situations where this is better than Desiree. They're pretty few and far between, but you'd rather have this card than not have it, I believe. So we have it. And then Ptolemy M7, again, like, either with the Serenir line that I discussed before, or if you have to pitch off like an Ash Blossom that you really would rather have against your opponent, you can weave an M7 into your line to get that Ash back. So this gives you even more flexibility, and this also gives you a little bit more like board breaking potential. If you've already gone through a Chaos Angel, this could be like a turn 5 play, for example. Going into Link monsters, of course, all of the usual suspects for the Fiendsmith engine, but also Ognamday. This card's crazy, actually. This card's really good. It makes your Fiendsmith line kind of like an access code line, if that makes sense, because you can make Sequence. Sequence will make Desiree. Then you can link into Ognamday, which will trigger your Desiree when it's hitting the graveyard to, you know, send any card on the field to the graveyard. And then Ognamday is able to then put the Desiree back on field and equip itself to it. And Ognamday gives your equipped monster 600 attack per link rating of the monsters equipped to it. So if you also then use Sequence's graveyard effect to equip to the Desiree, this Desiree is 5,800, can't be targeted, and can non-target negate 5 cards on the field. You never need that many negates on one card, but the 5,800 body is telling enough, and together with Lacrima as well, you can just like constantly cycle back into this Ognamday and make Desiree super sticky. It's kind of a way to replace the utility of Fiendsmith's Lacrima, where it could reborn the Desiree if it gets outed, and make lines a little bit easier that way. So like it can turn like any 3 cards into your Desiree again, which is kind of what your Fiendsmith's already doing. But it makes it even more potent as like a way to kill your opponent, which is always appreciated. You know, through all those. And then IPSP, parts of your end board. SP can trigger Branded Regain to draw a card, which is kind of the name of the game here. You're trying to draw into your non-engine and your Bystials as much as possible. So having a way to reliably do that with Regained is nice. You can also end on both of these, which is funny, especially with Ognamday. This gives you another target for IP to go into, but also you can Regained, put your SP back, and then just summon it off the IP again and use its first effect, and then have it for your own turn again, which is a funny thing you can do. But, you know, I don't have to talk too much about these cards. These cards are very good and very played for a very good reason. And Seal and Striker, we talked about those as well, but one thing I did want to mention about Hieratic Seal specifically is its synergy with Deception, because funny enough, Deception tributes a monster. So if you tribute Seal, you're then able to summon something from deck. So most of the time that's going to actually be Serenir, because the line where you Deception tribute Hieratic Seal gives you the option of linking this off, putting a Lubellion in graveyard, and having access to Ptolemy, which is how you get your Bystial engine accessed while still getting a Magnamut off the Lubellion that you had back. If you don't need to do that for whatever reason, you can, of course, summon Black Metal or summon Magnamut to get advantage that way. Or you can summon a Serenir to get advantage that way. Like, if you have to go second game 1, and you can start with your Black Metal line to make Seal, and then just Deception tribute this off and still have a play line, even if they stop the Deception, which is really nice. And that's kind of the name of this whole deck, is the little micro synergies that pop up while playing like 5 different engines together. It ends up being like a really consistent, really fun and dynamic deck that its playlines change all the time, and it makes it really difficult to play against because you don't really know what the deck wants to do until it starts doing things. So you have to make judgment calls constantly, and it makes for really good Yu-Gi-Oh, I think. So just going into the side deck now, and to make really bad Yu-Gi-Oh, we have the turn skip cards. Milcharmies are stupid. Milcharmies are really good, but I'm not totally sold on maining them for the reasons stated before, and also only having one Fuelos and having 3 Perulia isn't the greatest ratio for maining them, so I'd rather just side them for now. If I get more Fuas, I will definitely consider maining them, but that's where I'm at right now. Also playing 3 Crossout, 2 Talent, and an Anti-Spell for going first. Also have Branded Beast to tech in for matchups where the spot removal is more important than the card advantage that Regain provides. You can also use this as a way of cycling back Regained so that you can just like send off Regained with Witch, but it's very much a corner case for the card. I'd rather just have it in the side deck for when I need it to, like, you know, hit Nightmare Thrones, hit Nightmare Pains, hit Runic Stun back rows, that kind of thing. And then just the go second options. Like I said, I don't think the black metal card or the red eyes cards are particularly good for going second, so you can just side that entire engine out, and that gives you right away 3 Charmies and Sphere modes. And it might be weird in your head to play Sphere mode with so many hand traps in the main deck, but you can just, you know, recognize that you have a Sphere mode and you can just drop it on your opponent and hold all those hand traps and play a long game, where your Sphere mode is dealing with their first wave and then your hand traps are dealing with their follow-up. So that's the way to think about Sphere mode in this deck specifically, and then just Duster is Duster. It is like the best one of to play in the slot that it has. Otherwise, it could be like a third talent, but I think just more spell and trap removal is always welcome. So that's where we're at for the moment. I am constantly testing this and constantly tweaking things and reimagining how it works, but that's the general build. I'll put a little combo tutorial, combo showcase, whatever video together for this in the coming days. But for now, thank you for watching. If you like what you're seeing and if you want to see more, feel free to, you know, like, comment, and subscribe and all of that. And I will see you in the next one. Peace out.